Good morning, Mr. Chairperson. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Are we ready?
We are, Chairperson. There are two counsel who should put themselves on record at the start of proceedings, Mr. Mpofu and Ms. Goodman.
Yes, okay, let them do so. I think they'll come and do it at the podium there, Mr. Chairperson, but somebody will sanitize first.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Good morning, Mr. Mpofu. It's good to see you.
Always a pleasure to see you, Chair, as well.
Yes.
Chairperson, I appear with Mr. Naidu, my learned friend and junior, for the witness, Mr. Ramosebudi.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Good morning.
I appear on behalf of Nedbank, Chairperson. I'm instructed by Alan and Overy, and I'm accompanied by my attorney, Ms. Khan.
Yes, give me your name, please.
Isabel Goodman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairperson.
Chair, Mr. Ramosebudi will be testifying today. Mr. Ramosebudi has not furnished a full witness statement, but he has responded to a Rule 10.6 notice, Chair. You will find that 10.6 notice, which is dated 5 October 2020 at page, Flow Funds Bundle 4, page 8. And Mr. Ramosebudi's responses to the questions in that notice run from page 14 in this Flow Funds Volume 4 bundle.
Well, did he comply with the 10.6 directive?
Yes, Chair. He furnished answers to questions. We're not suggesting that Mr. Ramosebudi was in contempt of the notice. He did furnish answers. They were slightly later than the anticipated return date. And in some respects, the answers were fairly cursory and anticipated answers that might come in these proceedings. But we don't want to make an issue of that at this stage, Chair.
Well, it doesn't appear to me that he complied with the 10.6 directive that I issued. The 10.6 directive directed him to deliver an affidavit or affirmed declaration. What I've seen is neither an affidavit nor an affirmed declaration.
That is correct, Chair. Maybe we can cure that deficiency.
And there seems to be, it doesn't seem to have provided any explanation as to why he didn't provide an affidavit or affirmed declaration when the directive was quite clear. That's number one. Number two, there are areas where he was supposed to give information and he says he will give it at the hearing. He doesn't give it in the document in which he was supposed to give it.
That is true too, Chair. There are a number of questions which he doesn't, well, there are two questions really, under item 20, where he says information in this regard will be provided at the hearing. I understand from Mr. Mpofu that in respect to these questions, the witness will be asserting a right against self-incrimination.
Well, you see, if in the affidavit that's what he said, then one would understand. It's just that he says, I will provide information at the hearing, but he's not providing it there. That doesn't appear to be somebody who is asserting that right.
That is true, Chair.
But of course, I think Mr. Mpofu might wish to say something on this before we proceed. Let me
Thank
hear
you, Chair.
what Mr.
Might I,
Yeah.
in relation to the failure to furnish an affidavit, that I submit could be cured if Mr. Ramosebudi confirms the contents of his statement under oath in front of you, Chair.
Yeah, yes, no, it could be cured, but I'm concerned about the fact that it's still not compliance.
Indeed.
You know, if you are directed to finish an affidavit or a firm declaration, that's what you finish. Because there's a reason why the requirement is that it should be an affidavit or an affirm declaration and not just a statement.
Indeed, Chair. I certainly am not going to argue to the contrary.
Yes, let me hear what Mr. Mpofu may have to say. Let them sanitize Mr. Mpofu before you. Mr. Mpofu.
Yes, Chair. Chairperson, well, I was going to address you anyway, Chair, or just on the approach that we're going to take.
Yes.
So may I propose that so that I don't have to come up and down, that I do
You
that
can do
address,
everything,
and
yeah.
then in the process then deal
Yeah.
with the
Okay.
concerns that
Yes,
the Chair has
okay.
raised. Thank you, Chair. Chair, well, I'll be very brief. I wanted just to put on record a few things. Mr. Chaskalson and I have had some discussions, and I'm happy to say that we have, at least we understand each other or found each other on certain broad areas.
Well, my experience is generally that certainly I'm not, I think it's the same in other fora in which I've been involved, but certainly when you have been appearing here, there's been lots of cooperation
Thank you, Chair.
from your side, and so I'm not surprised if you found each other, broadly speaking.
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate that. So, in a nutshell, Chair, as in the spirit that the Chair is alluding to, one has always tried to find this balance between protecting the constitutional rights of the witness, but assisting the Commission and not being obstructive. So what we have done is to indicate to Mr. Chaskalson that there are three broad topics in respect of which we will assert the privilege against self-incrimination. Now, Chair, you and I have had this debate before. We know, we're fully aware that the privilege cannot be asserted broadly, because then it amounts to the right to silence.
Yes,
We also are aware that it also cannot be asserted, by broad topics. But when I say broad topics, I know that it must be asserted question by question. But Mr. Chaskalson and I will know which those areas are.
Yes.
Then, Chair, we will, of course, we'll also employ what I'll call the Mukhesi method, which we employed before, of just being here to police Mr. Chaskalson to make sure that he doesn't stray. We know it's very tempting, Chair.
Well, I think that the experience that happened during Mr. Mokgetsi's evidence was a very positive experience. It was cooperation, it was a commitment to assist the Commission as much as possible. My recollection is that it was only one or two maximum
areas.
3 questions that he, in respect of which he asserted his privilege. Otherwise, with your advice, he was able to just give answers and give evidence. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Particularly in this case, in fact, the same as Mr. Mokgesi, if you remember, Chair, that there were areas where effectively he was educating all of us about how things work.
Yes.
So Mr. Ramosebudi will do the same. I know that Mr. Chaskalson wants to ask him certain technical questions because the area where he works is very technical, just so that we're all on the same page. And we will be happy to deal with that. There may, of course, be areas where there's differences of opinion, whether the line has been crossed. Then the Chair will just give a ruling if that happens. Yes.
No, that's fine.
Yes. Now, Chair, I also wanted to indicate upfront that at some stage I will sneak out. I will leave Mr. Naidu to take over. So I don't want the Chair to send the police for me here. If I do that.
You have got to make sure.
Yes, you never know these days. So apart from that, Chair, to address the concerns that the Chair has raised, let me just indicate that the 10-6 response happened before Mr. Naidu and I were involved in this matter. We don't want to make any excuses. We accept, Chair, that strictly speaking, it doesn't comply with the obvious requirement to have it done under oath.
Yes.
So there are 2 issues that the Chair has raised. The first one, about it being done under oath, I was going to propose what Mr. Chaskalson has proposed. Just for the sake of progress. That can be cured by simply Mr. Ramosebudi confirming his statement under oath now here. Yes. As far as the second issue, Chair, is concerned, which is the failure to answer certain questions. Indeed, the Chair is quite correct. What really should have been indicated there, even at that stage, was that he will be asserting his right. But we would really humbly ask the Chair to condone such non-compliance on the understanding that the statement will be confirmed under oath. And number 2, wherever it's vague, it really should have said that he'll be asserting his Section 35 rights.
Okay. No, that's all right.
Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Mr. Mpofu. Thank you very much. Mr. Mpofu, I always say that it's always good to deal with experienced lawyers who know what their case is. They focus on the real case and not on other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I need to ask you for guidance, Chair. Because there is just the Rule 10.6 notice and a response, for the purposes of numbering annexures, there isn't a statement with affidavits attached. But there is a large bundle of documents that the Commission has prepared for the questioning of Mr. Ramosebudi. We will be referring to very, very many of those documents, and might I suggest that we give the bundle an annexure number with pagination references in the bundle, rather than making each new document an annexure number, because there will literally be hundreds that we may traverse in the course of today.
I think what we should do is, 1, yes, the file should be given a bundle number, that's one which you say, and I think at some stage, it need not be now, I think at some stage there must be a process of formally admitting those documents. Now, you say there are lots of them, but once they have been identified and they can be marked, they can be given the exhibit number that will be used outside of this process, but at a certain stage, you can come back and say, the documents as they appear from page whatever, you ask that they be admitted, each one of them be admitted and be given the exhibit number that you would have allocated, and I can just take 5 minutes to do that. How is that?
Chair, my one concern with that is that when you come back to read the record, it may be difficult to correlate references in today's testimony with what the exhibit numbers will subsequently turn out to be.
Well, before we give the exhibit numbers, we would have used page numbers,
Indeed.
Isn't it?
Indeed.
And even if the exhibit numbers are there, as long as everyone remembers what page they appear, that should be fine, isn't it?
Indeed. If that file, FOF4, remains in your possession in the form that it currently sits, then you'll be able to identify which documents are being referred to.
The pagination would remain as
Indeed.
it is. But I think as a formality, it's important to admit them at a certain stage and then give them exhibit numbers. But anyone wishing to refer to them doesn't have to say exhibit number so and so. If they say that such and such a document appears on page so and so, that's still good enough.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
But then I think what we can do immediately in relation to exhibit numbers is introduce the two Rule 10.6 notices and the response as exhibits VV 4.1, VV 4.2, and VV 4.3.
Yes, before we do that, let's just confirm the file that you will be using is Flow of Funds Bundle 4.
Indeed, and only that file today.
Okay. And are there two 10.6 directives?
The
or
first,
is it the same one?
No, there are two, Chair. The first is requiring Mr. Ramosebudi's presence today to testify. That's the document at page 3, which I would ask to be VV 4.1.
The first chairperson's directive in terms of Regulation 10.6, starting at page 3, is admitted as exhibit 4, W4.1. Is that right?
VV4, VV4.1. We're on a VV, double V.
Yeah,
Indeed.
okay. V 4.1. You know, if you put double V together, it could be a W. Okay, so that's the first one, and the second one will be
at page 8.
Double V 4.2. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes, so the second directive in terms of Regulation 10.6, starting at page 8, will be admitted as exhibit V 4.2. Yeah, okay.
And then Mr. Ramosebudi's response to the second 10.6, which appears at from page 14, can be V 4.3, Chair.
Mr. Ramosebudi's response to the 10.6 directive starting at page 14 is admitted as exhibit V 4.3. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. At this point, I think we're good to begin.
Thank you. Thank you. You may proceed.
I think Mr. Ramosebudi needs to be sworn in. And,
Oh, yes, Miss, would you please administer the oath of affirmation?
Please state your full names for the record.
Phetolo Ramosebudi.
I think you must just raise the microphone and then try and speak up a bit.
Please state your full names for the record.
Phetolo Ramosebudi.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yeah.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Yes, you may proceed, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Ramosebudi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Mr. Ramosebudi, I first just want to cure the problem with the statement that we've discussed earlier. And can I ask you to turn, first of all, to page 8 of that file in front of you. The pages I'll be using are the page numbers are the black ones on the left-hand side and on the top left. And you'll see they say FOF-04- and then there's a number. It's the number after FOF-04 that I'll be referring to today.
Yes,
do you
sir.
recognize the document on page 8?
Yes, I do.
And that was a notice in terms of Regulation 10.6 of this Commission that was served on you. And if you go down to page 13, you'll see that it's dated 5 October 2020.
Yes, I do.
And will you confirm that it was served on you?
Come again?
You did receive this notice on 5
Yes.
October or shortly thereafter?
Yes, I did.
And you furnished a response to it which starts at page 14. Will you confirm that's the case?
Yes, I did.
And the document that runs from pages 14 to 19 is your response, which is dated 7 November 2020. Will you confirm that the contents of that document are correct?
Yes, I can confirm they are correct.
Thank you. Mr. Ramosebudi, in that statement, you touched very briefly on your history in the public sector. Can you just describe to the chairperson your career in, from the beginning till the point at which you left Transnet?
Thank you, Chairperson. My career started in 1992 when I was in an academia with the Medical University of Southern Africa, which then, when I was in academia, did my MBA with the University of Pretoria, after which then I went to work for the Nedco Group in Cyprus, asset management. Thereafter, then I went into the stockbroking. From stockbroking, I went to National Treasury. That's when I started working in the public sector.
And can you give a date to the chair?
I started working in National Treasury in 1998, I think it's around August, September 1998, which then I left in 1999, April. Subsequent to that, I went back into the private sector, but then I think in late 1999, I went to work for Development Bank of Southern Africa in the treasury function. From then I started working in the public sector from DBSA, NHFC, Transnet, ACSA, South African Airways, and back again to Transnet.
And just to get the chronology, Mr. Ramosebudi, you deal with this at paragraphs 2 to 6 of your statement. You were at the Development Bank from 1999 to 2002. Is that correct?
That's correct.
the National Housing Finance Corporation, that was NHFC, 2002 to around 2006. ACSA, 2007 to 2011. SAA, 2012 to February 2015. And Transnet, 2015 to 2018. And what I've skipped out there is that you were Deputy Treasurer of Transnet back from 2006 to May 2007.
That's correct.
At ACSA, SAA, and Transnet, you were Treasurer. Is that correct?
At ACSA, yes, I was a treasurer, and in SAE, I was a treasurer.
And Transnet from 2015 to 2018?
I was a treasurer.
Yes. Then at page 16 of your statement, you deal with a range of entities with which you have a relationship, or in which you have an interest, or your family members have an interest. Can I start with the first entity, which is at Roman 7 on page 16, Risk Stats Consulting? Can you tell the Chair what Risk Stats Consulting is and what interest, if any, you had in it?
You're referring to page 16 on my side. Okay.
Top left-hand side.
Okay. Ristats was a trading company of one of my company called Regiments.
So it was a subsidiary. Is it
No,
it's a separate entity that was a subsidiary of
It
Regiments?
was a trading name for Regiments.
A trading name. So it's not a company in its own right. Mr. Ramosebudi?
Yeah, within Regiments, there is a number of trading names for which we can call it subsidiary from that perspective.
So Risk Stats isn't actually an entity in its own right.
Yeah,
It's
not
merely
an
a
entity,
trade name of
it's
Risk
within
Stats.
Regiments.
Thank you. And your interest in risk maths? What was or is your interest in risk maths?
I was the shareholder, 100% shareholder of the company.
Thank you. And Kaditlu Health Services. What is your relationship to Kaditlu Health Services Pty Limited?
This is my younger brother's company.
And which do you have just one younger brother?
No, I've got a number of siblings.
Okay, which brother is the brother with the interest in Kaditlu Health Services?
The psychology.
Psychology Ramosebudi. Rams Capital, CC.
That's my company.
And is it again 100% interest?
Yeah, 100% interest for myself.
And Azana, it's Azana, not Azania.
Azana.
That's Azana. Azana Capital Markets, which trades as Venus Liquor Store.
Yeah, it was one of my company.
And when you said was one of your companies, are you saying at one stage you had a 100% interest in it?
Yes.
And when did you...
Sorry, was that answer yes? Was your answer yes? I didn't
Yes,
hear
I said
you.
yes.
Okay.
And when did you cease to have 100% interest in Azana?
No, I got deregistered, I can't remember.
Until deregistration, it was your company.
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer. So you'll have to try and speak up, Mr. Ramosebudi. I think Mr. Charles asked you whether until it was deregistered,
I
it
said
was
yes.
your company.
I said yes.
Yes,
until-
okay, I didn't hear that answer. Okay.
Then, Mr. Ramosebudi, before we get into any details relating to past events, because we're going to be talking about interest swaps and currency hedges, I thought we might take advantage of your expertise just to explain what we're talking about here. So could you briefly describe to the Chair what an interest swap is?
Thank you, Chairperson. An interest swap is exactly as the name means. It means two things. One is an interest rate, the other two is, the second one is a swap. A swap is literally meaning is you are exchanging things. So in an interest rate swap, one party could be having a fixed interest rate, the other party could be having a variable interest rate. In the industry, they call it a floating rate interest rate. So one party could wish to exchange, swap, the fixed one for a floating one. And that's how it happens in the market.
So I have an overdraft with my bank, which has a variable rate at prime. And I want to plan for the future, and I want to know exactly what I'm going to be owing my bank on my overdraft on a fixed amount. So I find someone who is willing to lend the money that I'm going to owe the bank at a fixed rate to me. So they will give me their fixed interest rate, and in return they'll assume the variable interest rate that I owe the bank. And now my liability is to pay a fixed interest rate, not a variable interest rate. That's obviously, it's not an individual's household expense issue, it's a company's issue. But is that broadly what we're talking about?
That's exactly what it is, Chairperson.
Basically, you could be talking of two, shall I call them regimes, interest regimes. The one interest regime is a fixed rate interest. The other one is a variable one. And you could be having a particular regime, interest regime, for a certain period, and you want to change that and move to the other interest regime. Basically, that's what it is.
That's what it is, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay.
And sometimes you refer, sometimes one sees reference being made to hedging interest rate exposure. Would that be a situation where you have a certain interest rate exposure which you want to swap and pin down, or you have variable interest rate exposure that you want to turn into a fixed one, and you enter into a swap? Would that be a hedge of your variable exposure?
That's true, Mr. Chairperson. Chairperson, the hedging precisely means protecting yourself. It's a word that is used in the market or in the financial market sector. Hedging, you're protecting yourself. You can be protecting yourself from a volatile interest rate environment, or you can be protecting yourself from a volatile inflation, market. So you either use any of those two instruments, the fixed one or the floating one, and it depends on which position you are sitting on, which you want to protect.
And we'll also be encountering currency hedges. Can you explain to the Chair what a currency hedge is?
Chairperson, a currency hedge or a protection from the currency exposure or a volatility of the exchange rate is precisely using a cross-currency interest rate swaps or forward exchange rate swaps that you can use to protect the position that you are sitting. If you happen to be going to buy an equipment outside the country which is priced in a currency that is not South African rand, so you need to make sure that you protect yourself for volatilities of that your exchange rate against those exchange rates.
And could you explain to the Chair what sort of devices you would use? Let's talk about Transnet buying locomotives. Assume Transnet wants to buy locomotives that are going to be dollar denominated, and some of them are going to be delivered in 5 years' time at a dollar price. what sort of hedging mechanisms would Transnet be able to adopt to make sure that it knows how much it's going to have to pay in rands?
In that case, and in most of the institutions that I've come across in my working life, the institutions will use cross-currency swaps to hedge their expected purchase or delivery of an equipment that is coming from foreign country. And that's how most of the institutions are using it, and then I think Transnet has been using it.
So cross-currency swap would be you go to a bank and you say, here is a schedule of dollar payments that I want to receive from you, and what is the corresponding schedule of rand payments that I have to make to you? Is that correct?
Simplistically, yes, Chairperson, that's what it is. But you need to work out what is an average exchange rate applicable to those cash flows, so that at day one, today, you are not in a loss position or in a gaining position when you transact that position.
But what you'll be doing is you'll be agreeing over the next 5 years on such and such a date you will transfer $1 million to me and I will pay back to you so many rands. Or it may not be on the same date. This is the schedule of the rand payments I will be making to you on these dates. This is the schedule of dollar payments you'll be making to me on those dates.
Chairperson, that's true. So the intermediate cash flows will be exchanged during the course of the contract itself. At the end of the contract, you are exchanging back your currency.
Thank you, Mr. Ramosebudi. Can we now start looking at some of the details of your career as Treasurer, and can we start with ACSA? And the first document I want to take you to is a document that appears at page 20. So if you can go to page 20, again, top left-hand black number. And do you recognize that document?
No, I don't recognize it.
Okay. Well, it looks like an invoice issued by Regiments Capital to ACSA on 25 September 2009. I think you might be on the wrong page, Mr. Ramosebudi. Top left, page 20.
Yes, whenever Mr. Chaskalson refers you to page numbers, it will be the black numbers on the top left corner of each page. So you can ignore the red numbers.
Page 20 years is an invoice. I can't remember this invoice, yes.
Yes. But what it reflects is that Regiments is invoicing ACSA. Is that correct?
True.
And in the bottom left, just above payment details, there's a note, total agreed outstanding fee per phase 4 as per mandate. And that's 2.734 million, 50% of outstanding funding invoice final billing 683,610.
Yeah.
Now, it talks about a mandate. Was Regiments Capital engaged by ACSA at that stage?
As the document says, so it means there was a mandate, between ACSA and Regiments in this point.
But I'm asking you, do you recall that ACSA had engaged Regiments, and if we go up to the heading in relation to a funding plan, is what the invoice is heading, had ACSA engaged Regiments in relation to a funding plan?
ACSA did work on the ACSA funding plan, but I have never seen the mandate, but I heard that there's a mandate.
Sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
ACSA work on the funding mandate, with
ACSA or Regiments?
Regiments work on the ACSA funding mandate.
Yes.
But I've never had a copy myself.
So you've never seen this invoice?
No, I'm not saying this was, I can't remember the invoice, but I've never seen the mandate.
Oh,
You are reading the total agreed outstanding fees as per phase 4 as per mandate.
Yes, together with the heading of the invoice just below the address of ACSA, where it says ACSA Funding Plan Phase 4. Are you aware of what this funding plan was and what role regiments played in it?
Yes, I'm aware.
And can you tell the chair?
In 2008 sometime, regiments were brought in to work on the funding mandate for Airports Company South Africa. And through that mandate, the advice on a number of funding structures, within the mandate that we are referring to here.
And did they get that appointment pursuant to a tender?
Chairperson, as I said, that's why I say that I've never seen the mandate. So they came in, and as I know, they're working through a mandate, but I've never seen a mandate.
My question was slightly different, not whether you've seen the mandate, but whether you're aware whether it was preceded by a tender process.
With my recollections, with this particular company, Regiments, when I came in 2008, Chairperson, I think they were there in 2007 on similar mandates of a funding plan. So whether during that time they went through a process, I don't know. I was not working for ACSA at the time.
So you don't know whether there was any procurement process involving competitive bids or anything in relation to the regiment's mandate?
I don't know. I would not know.
Can I take you to this invoice again? And it says, total agreed outstanding fee per phase 4 as per mandate and 2.734 million. That suggests that there was a fixed fee for the mandate that Regiments was performing at ACSA. Would you agree with that?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
It
As I said, I didn't
says
see the
agreed outstanding fee per phase 4 as per mandate.
I haven't seen the contract with Regiments, so I can't say there was a fixed fee or not.
Okay. Could you describe to the chair what sort of work Regiments performed pursuant to this mandate when you found them at ACSA when you arrived?
When I was chairperson, when I was at the ACSA, they developed the funding plan. The funding plan it's a piece of information within the PFMA that is required, that the board needs to approve, sent to the shareholder or the Ministry of Finance or National Treasury. And from that perspective, the institution, which at the time ACSA then could go out to raise any funding that it requires as per the funding plan that is developed. So that's where the funding plan came through and how regiments have been implementing the funding plan. Where they've raised the money, I can't remember a number of those institutions, but they've raised some money for ACSA in 2009.
So was Regiment's mandate just to design the funding plan, or actually then to go out and raise money in terms of the funding plan?
Chairperson, through yourself, I'm not going to respond in terms of whether the mandate, because I have not seen that. But what I've seen Regiment doing is they've developed the funding plan. They've actually put the funding plan in action to raise the money that has been determined from the funding plan perspective.
So they did both, you just don't know which, whether both or one or the other formed part of this particular mandate?
Yeah, they've executed the funding plan.
If they were executing the funding plan and it wasn't part of that mandate, would there have been any procurement process necessary for them to go through to execute the funding plan?
Chairperson, I'm sorry to respond to that. I don't know, because I don't know the details of the mandate, whether it was to develop the funding plan and execute it, or whether it was to develop the funding plan and then go out to the market to raise funding. That I've got no information to it.
So you don't know what their mandate was?
No.
Can I then take you to the next document, which is on its face an email from someone called Mario Visnenza, Mario V at nedbank.coza. It's dated 1 October 2009, and it's addressed to Eric Wood, C.C. Moss Brinkman, and Elise Brits. Can I first ask you, do you know who Mario Visnenza is?
Mario Vesnez is, I'm not sure if he's still, but was one of the traders in Nedbank.
Okay. Eric Wood?
Eric Wood is one of the directors of Regiments.
Moss Brinkman? Brickman, not Brinkman.
He's also one of the traders at Nedbank.
And Elise Brits?
I don't know that one.
The heading is ACSA interest rate swaps, and the email reads, "Hi Eric, here are the current indicative rates on these transactions, bearing in mind the strategy of staggering the trades over a few days." And then some rates are set out. Am I correct that what this would be is an email sent from Nedbank to Eric Wood, who's acting in his capacity as Regiments, implementing ACSA's funding plan and looking for funding for ACSA? Is that the context in which this email would have been sent?
And that's what I'm saying, yes.
So there is then a description of what the indicative rates are, 1.7 billion swap, and the details are set out. 250 million swap, and the details are set out. And then there's a line that I want you to comment on. Mr. Visnenza says, "We leave it up to you to include a margin for us to share on the usual 50-50 agreement." Is this Mr. Visnenza saying to Mr. Wood, here are our terms for the swap, you add in a margin, in other words, increase the amount that ACSA is going to pay, and we'll share that on a 50-50 basis? Is that how you would understand it as a person in finance?
Yes, I see. I read it that way, yes.
You do read it that way. Were you aware that Mr. Wood and Nedbank were doing this 50-50 agreement at the expense of ACSA?
No, Chairperson, I was not aware of that.
Well, appear to have been doing it. We don't know whether they did do it. So you weren't aware that Mr. Wood and Nedbank appear to have been including margins for them to share on a 50-50 agreement at the expense of ACSA?
No, I was not aware.
Can I take you to the next document, which is at page 22? It's 4 days later, another email from Mr. Visnenza to Eric Wood, again copied to Mr. Brickman. It says, "Fee calculations on ACSA swaps, Regiments fee. Hi Eric, I have attached the spreadsheet with the calculation of the fee due to Regiments on the 2 ACSA swaps dealt last week." You recall the previous email had 2, 1.75 billion and I think it was 250 million. You will see that the calculation was done on the same basis as the previous ACSA transaction. Do you know what the previous ACSA transaction was that he's referring to here?
No. Actually, I don't even know which transaction they're referring to here.
Sorry, Mr. Ramosebudi. Can I ask that you speak a little bit closer to your microphone, because it's difficult to hear your answers.
I'm not sure which transaction here they're referring to here.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to ask you. The 10 BP, that's 10 basis points, due to regiments over the life of the transactions equates to a PV, that's present value amount, of 11,548,551. On the invoice to Nedbank, please include a line confirming that you agree to Nedbank clawing back a portion of the fee should the transaction to ACSA terminate early, as well as confirming that ACSA is aware that a fee is being paid by Nedbank to regiments on these transactions. Let me know if you have any queries. So can I take it step by step? The 10 basis points due to regiments over the life of the transactions equals a present value amount of 11.548 million. Is he saying there that if we increase the interest that ACSA is going to pay to Nedbank by 10 basis points over the life of the transaction, and we look at all of those values and take a present value, that will equate to 11,548,551. Is that what he's saying?
That's what I see, I read here.
Yes. And if we read this with his previous 50-50 agreement email from a few days previously, that would suggest that in addition to the 11 million that Regiments is going to receive at the expense of ACSA on this transaction, Nedbank will be receiving a similar amount at the expense of ACSA. Would you agree with that?
If they are applying the same basis, then I would say, but if I don't know which basis they're applying, the methodology they're going to be applying on the other one.
Yes, I'm saying assume that they're doing this 50-50 basis.
Assumptions is very, very difficult and dangerous.
Yes, we'll deal with the difficulties. You just have to answer my questions on the basis of an assumption. Then the difficulty is mine, not yours. So on the basis of my assumption, would Nedbank also be getting the same fee at the expense of ACSA?
On the basis of assumption, Mr. Chairperson, yes, Chairperson. But maybe the arrangement could be on a different asset, instrument by instrument. So that's why I don't want to make an assumption.
Yeah, no, but I will ask a lot of questions on the basis of assumptions. I'd ask you to take those assumptions as given. Obviously, you can't be blamed if the assumptions turn out to be false later. I will be blamed. Then the next line, on the invoice to Nedbank, please include a line confirming you agree to Nedbank clawing back a portion of the fee should the transaction to ACSA terminate early, as well as confirming that ACSA is aware that a fee is being paid by Nedbank to Regiments on these transactions. Let's take the first part of that sentence. Please confirm that you agree to Nedbank clawing back a portion of the fee should the transaction to ACSA terminate early. Is he saying there, if your fees have been calculated on the basis that this transaction runs to term, that 10 basis points PV'd is 10 basis points of the whole life of the transaction. But if ACSA, and we're going to pay that to you now, but if ACSA terminate midway through this transaction, we're going to be out of pocket because we will have paid you the 11 million, but we won't be getting it back from ACSA. So we need a clause from you saying that if that happens, we get back part of your fee. Is that what he's saying?
Yes, that's true.
Yes. Then he says, we want a line confirming that ACSA is aware that a fee is being paid by Nedbank to Regiments on these transactions. So we want a line on your invoice saying that ACSA is aware that this fee is being paid. Can I ask you to go to the next page, which is an invoice dated, page 23. And there we see an invoice from Regiments to Nedbank. It's invoice Ned 409, addressed to Mr. Moss Brickman at Nedbank. And you see underneath the invoice is for 11.548 million plus VAT, giving 13,165,348. And as I understand it, that's an amount that ACSA will be paying back over the life of the swap transaction with Nedbank. Is that correct?
Yes, as the calculations mentioned here.
Yes. And it says origination and facilitation of 2 billion interest rate swap between Nedbank Capital and ACSA. The service amount was determined as per agreement with Nedbank Capital. This issue is issued under the Introduction of Derivative Transactions Agreement between Regiments and Nedbank, dated 30 June 2009. Regiments Capital Pty Limited has informed its client that it is earning a fee for the facilitation of the above transaction. Did Regiments inform ACSA that it was earning a fee on this basis on the transaction? Were you aware that Regiments was going to be paid 13 million by ACSA, by Nedbank, and that ACSA would have to pay that back to Nedbank over the life of the swap?
Yeah, I think I know that they would be earning a fee, but I'm not sure if there was a communication around it.
Well, sorry, let's take that slowly. You think you know that they were going to be earning a fee?
Yeah.
Did you know what the fee was?
I wouldn't have known, because I can't remember if there was a written confirmation around it.
So you might not have known that the fee was 13.165 million.
Yeah.
But ACSA was going to have to pay that amount back to Nedbank. Regiments weren't going to have to pay that.
I wouldn't have known the quantum, but I would have known that ACSA would pay a fee for restructuring of the swap.
But that fee could have been 1 million, it could have been 13 million, it could have been 50 million. Wouldn't you have taken steps to find out how much you were committing your organization to pay back?
True, but as I say, the financial instruments, the way you price them, you look at the fair value. The fair value is a composite interest rate that is given for a counterparty, like in this case, ACSA, to pay. So you need to then go back and check, from a pricing point of view, whether this rate that you're getting relative to the other instruments that you have and the other instruments that you benchmark against yourself, is it high or not? And then from that perspective, then you can make a determination. So you look at the composite, you don't look at the component.
No, I hear what you're saying, but let's go back to procurement processes. You said earlier that you weren't aware what the mandate of Regiments was. Is that correct? So it's possible that that original mandate...
Hang on. Mr. Ramosebudi, when you nod, that won't be on the record. So just articulate your answer and say yes, if the answer is yes, no, if it's not, if it's no. Yeah. I think you must just repeat that question, Mr. Chaskalson.
Mr. Ramosebudi, you said earlier that you weren't aware of what Regiment's mandate under the funding plan was. It might have just been to design the plan. It might also have been to raise money in terms of the plan.
True.
Thank you. Now, if it was just to design the plan, then there was no existing mandate that covered Regiments taking this fee at ACSA's expense via Nedbank for raising this money from Nedbank. Would you accept that? So there are one of two possibilities. Let me take a step back. There are one of two possibilities. Either the mandate did cover raising funds, or it just covered designing the plan but not raising funds. You'll agree that?
Chairperson, I think Mr. Chairperson is making it very simple. I said I have never seen the mandate, what it entails. And in this case, we were talking on the invoice that was dealing with funding plan. So from that perspective, I said, I don't know whether it was the development of funding plan and the execution of the funding plan. But the mandate could have covered a number of other issues, including interest rate swap, so which we did not discuss at the time.
Yes, but I think Mr. Chaskalson's question is aimed at establishing your understanding of the effect or implications of a certain mandate, such as for lawyers, if you are a lawyer, I instruct you to defend me in a criminal case at the magistrate's court. that doesn't necessarily mean if you lose, I'm convicted, I want you to appeal unless I ask you to appeal, give you that mandate, because I might think you are the one who didn't do your job, so I must get another lawyer. So what he is trying to establish is what would be your understanding of what a particular mandate would mean. If he had this type of mandate, would it mean he could also do A, B, C, D? Or could it mean he could not do that unless he had that other mandate? That's what I think he is seeking to establish. Maybe Mr. Chaskalson, you can then take it from there.
Thank you, Chair. Let's assume that and again, it's an assumption that I'm going to make, okay? Let's assume that the original mandate included raising funds. Make that assumption.
And risk management.
And?
Risk management.
And risk management. And risk management and designing the plan. It was an all-embracing one. If it did, we would expect to find in that original mandate payment terms for regiments, would we not? This is what you'll get paid for doing the risk management and the fund plan. This is how we will reimburse you when you raise funds. Would that not normally be what we would expect in the public sector?
Probably so.
So then, if regiments went off to Nedbank and said to Nedbank, we are raising money we're raising money for ACSA, what can you give us? And Nedbank said, well, we can do this swap for 1.75 billion and this one for 250 million. The terms of the original mandate would determine what regiment's fee would be vis-a-vis ACSA. Is that not correct?
If it's exclusively stated so in the mandate, that's the case.
Yes, if it was covered by the mandate. Now, if the mandate didn't cover raising funds, then regiments wouldn't have had the authority of ACSA to go to Nedbank to raise funds for ACSA, and Nedbank wouldn't have been able to charge a fee to ACSA for raising those funds. If somebody comes and says to Mr. Mpofu, I understand you want to go, cheers, you can leave now, I'll look after Mr. Ramosebudi for the rest of the day, and then presents you with a bill at the end of the day, are you going to pay that bill?
No.
So if regiment's mandate didn't include the raising of funds and they took it upon themselves just to raise funds, was ACSA obliged to pay them anything?
I guess not.
And so either ACSA had no obligation to pay them, or ACSA would have had an obligation to pay them, but that obligation would have been set out in a mandate of which you weren't aware. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you make any inquiries in relation to regiment's fee when they came back to you and said, we've done this deal with Nedbank, we'll be taking a fee for ourselves?
I guess that inquiry I would have made if I've made an appointment of regiments, and then I will have to check the payment against the mandate itself. So in this case, the appointments which preceded my time could not be questioned.
Yes, but I mean, you say you were aware that Nedbank was taking a fee, but as I understand your testimony now, you weren't really aware whether they were entitled to take a fee. They may have been, they may not have been. You didn't know.
Yes.
Did anybody else at ACSA know that regiments were taking a fee?
The signatories for the settlement of money should have known that.
Sorry, Mr. Mpofu has said something.
To say.
My question was, did anybody else at ACSA know whether Regiments was taking a fee. If I said Nedbank instead of ACSA, that was an error. So my question is, does anybody else at ACSA know whether whether Regiments was taking a fee on this transaction between ACSA and Nedbank?
Yeah, I would guess that those that have authorized the appointments of regiments to come and assist on the funding plan, through that mandate, they know that they didn't come to. They would have to take fees.
I'm not asking what you assumed, I'm asking what you knew. Did you know that anybody else
Yes,
at ACSA
yes,
knew that Regiments
yes,
was
yes,
taking a fee?
yes.
Who else at ACSA knew that Regiments was
I'm
taking?
sure the FD at the time knew that regiments is taking a fee.
And who was that FD?
At the time, it was Priscilla Mewelani.
Priscilla Mabelani. And you knew that she knew that Regiments was going to take a fee on these transactions?
In other words, you knew as opposed to you assuming that she knew.
I'm assuming that she knows because she has made an appointment on regiments to come and execute the funding plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Mr. Chaskowson is, well, his question might be a more nuanced one, maybe directed towards the end rather than the beginning when they were appointed, but whether she knew in the end that they were taking this fee. But he wants to know whether you knew that that person that you have mentioned knew that, or whether he is not asking whether you assumed, he just wants to know what you knew.
Mr. Shekelson, through yourself, Chairperson, I think it's a common cause when you appoint somebody to do something that they will be remunerated. So that's my assumption. Whether she knows that that was the case, I don't know.
So you don't, it's not as though you and Priscilla Mabelani were ever in a room with Regiments who said, oh, we're taking a 13 million fee on this deal?
Yeah.
So you never had any discussion
No.
with her on the basis of which you can say she knew?
No.
All you are saying is because she may have been involved in appointing them, you take it that she would know whether they would be entitled or not entitled to that.
On the basis that she appointed them.
Yeah, but not that
But
you,
we never had
a discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And if we still stay within your assumption, then if the assumption flows from the fact that she appointed them, you would assume that she would appoint them on particular terms that would govern their fees, would you not?
No, because I couldn't get into the discussion with her on the appointment of regiments.
Would it be...
I'm sorry, what did you say? Just repeat your answer.
I'm saying I didn't know because we have never had a discussion about the appointment of regiments with Priscilla.
Yes, but I think Mr. Chaskowson was saying, when you said because she was involved in appointing them, she would know, was that because you are saying in appointing them, the issue of what they would have been paid or what they would be entitled to would be dealt with in the appointment documents?
Precisely, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay.
So you would have assumed that an appointment of regiments would have been made that would have governed their appointment and the fees payable for that appointment.
True.
Let's go to the next document, which is page 32. Deals with a new swap.
Might this be the convenient time, Mr. Chaskowson?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, let's take the tea adjournment. We will resume at 11:30. Yes. Oh, Mr. Mpofu, you are excused. Okay. Thank you. We adjourn. Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ramosebudi, can I take you to a new document? It's on page 32.
I'm here, Mr. Jackson.
Again, it's an email from Mario Visnenza to Eric Wood, copied to Moss Brickman. The subject is ACSA interest rate swap. Has an attachment with a spreadsheet. Hi, Eric. Current indicative rate on the interest rate swap is as follows, and then the terms are set out. It's going to be a 1.5 billion swap. And then the same sentence. We leave it up to you to include a margin for us to share on the usual 50-50 agreement. I have to ask the same question to you again. Were you aware that that Regiments and Nedbank were going to share a margin on a 50-50 basis at ACSA's expense?
No, Chairperson.
Can we then go down to page 34, which is the spreadsheet that was attached to that email? No, I may have got that wrong. No. Can you describe to the Chair what this spreadsheet on page 34 is describing? It's called swapprofile.xls.
Chairperson, the sheet on page 4 just show the cash flow profile for a particular transaction that matures on the 29th of December 2023. So on the 18th of March 2024.
Can we then go over the page to page 36 and start with the email at the foot of page 36? Start with the email at the foot of page 34.
Page 34 is the cash flows profile. Eh?
I'm looking at the wrong numbers. I beg your pardon. I'm looking at red numbers. Go to the bottom of page 36. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The Mario Visnenza to Eric Wood, 10 March 2010. Hi, Eric. The attached spreadsheet illustrates the estimated future cash flows on the proposed swaps based on today's swap and CPI curves. On the JIBAR legs of the swaps, Nedbank will pay ACSA a quarterly interest rate payment calculated as 3-month JIBAR plus 2.6% on the amortizing notional profile. Nedbank will not pay any capital amount. On the CPI leg of the swaps, ACSA will pay Nedbank a quarterly interest payment calculated as the quoted real rates on the adjusted CPI notional amounts. The notional amounts on this leg of the swap are therefore adjusted by the change in the CPI level over the transaction period. Please note that ACSA will also have to pay Nedbank a capital amount on the maturity of the swaps, this amount being calculated as the difference between the adjusted notional amount on the maturity date and the initial notional amount on inception. This capital settlement is as per standard CPI swap convention. I hope that the mechanics of the CPI swaps are now clearer, but call me if you have further queries. Can you explain to the Chair what he's describing there? And if it may assist you, the spreadsheet that he's referring to starts at page 38. Maybe I can assist you. If you go to page 38, you'll see swap 1. Is this the swap 1 on page 38 relating to the JIBAR leg of the swaps, which Mr. Visnenza describes in his email, where ACSA pays a quarterly interest payment calculated as 3-month JIBAR plus 2.6% on the amortizing notional profile?
Chairperson, and this is on page 38. Let me explain just what Mr. Chairperson requested me to explain to you, Chairperson, on page 36. An email from Mario to Eric. In here, Mario says to Eric that the swap has two regimes. I'm just borrowing your terminology, Chairperson.
Yes.
The swap has two regimes. One regime is a floating rate of JIBOR plus 260 basis points, 2.6%. And then another regime is a inflation index, or a capital adjusted with an inflation index. So in what it says here, ACSA will pay on a quarterly basis, every 3 months, a CPI leg, or an inflation rate that's adjusted on a capital determined by a real rate on a quarterly basis until maturity. Whereas Nedbank will be paying JIBOR plus 260 basis points, JIBOR plus 2.6% on the same quarterly basis on an amortizing profile of the loan. So the loan amortizes up until the end of the period. Nedbank won't pay any capital amount. But somewhere here it says ACSA will pay a settlement adjusted for CPI at the end of the convection period, meaning that the balance of the capital is adjusted by the inflation. And over a period of time, then ACSA will settle that adjusted capital over a period of time, even though it's paying on an amortizing profile. But the balance accrue with inflation because it's paying on a real rate. That's what he says on this particular email.
And that's the JIBOR leg of the swap, because they're also the CPI legs.
No, the JIBOR leg is what Nedbank pays ACSA. And then the CPI leg is what ACSA is paying Nedbank.
Can I take you down to page 38? Because I think the suggestion is slightly different, because they're two separate regimes. He has one regime, which he calls swap 1 on page 38. And there you'll see the Nedbank paying ACSA JIBOR plus 260% over the amortizing profile. So the amortizing profile is reflected in the decreasing notional in the 1, 2, 3, 4th column. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What Nedbank pays to ACSA is JIBOR plus 2.6% on those decreasing amounts. That's in the next column.
Yeah.
Then there's a CPI notional column, which is going to determine what ACSA pays Nedbank. And ACSA's payments to Nedbank are in the far right column. And as you pointed out, there will be a large settlement payment at the end, that 903 million.
Yes.
But then if you go down a page, you'll see that there are separate swaps, which he calls swap 2A, swap 2B, and swap 2C. And there is a separate schedule of payments in relation to these three related swaps. So swap 2C sets out, 2A sets out the payments that everyone will pay at page 39. If you go down a page, you see swap 2B. And swap 2C on the last page, which is 41. And if we go back up to his email on page 36, Let's possibly clearer on the email at the top of page 36, which is a follow-up email from Mario to Eric and Moss, where he says, finally, the revised schedule and rates for the proposed inflation-linked swaps with ACSA, see attached spreadsheet, which we've just been looking at. Swap 1 is based on a notional amount of 1.5 billion amortizing on the JIBAR leg to match the underlying loan. That's what you described. Whilst the notional on the CPI leg is a constant amount of 1.5 billion adjusted by CPI. He then describes, and then he talks about swap 2A, swap 2B, and swap 2C have been structured in order to replicate the amortizing nature of the underlying loan. We've now calculated the notional amount such that the real rate is the same on all three swaps. The interest payments to ACSA on the JIBAR legs of the swaps will add up to the interest payments on the underlying amortizing loan. So can you explain to the Chair what swaps 2A, 2B, and 2C are?
The swap 2A to C, Chairperson, is a three swap that breaks the 1.5 billion into three swaps. And they are priced into a CPI rate against the 2.6% over JIBAR rate. So the 1.5 billion was, broken down into three swaps.
And at a later stage, when they refer to the three CPI swaps, are they going to be referring to 2A, 2B, and 2C?
Yes.
That was a yes, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, Chairperson.
Can I take you next to page 46? It's an email from Tabo Letlaka to yourself. Do you recall receiving this email? Dated 19 March 2010.
Yes, I'm on the page.
My question was, do you recall receiving this email?
Yeah, Chairperson, I see the email. Probably it came to my inbox. I can't recall, but I think it came to me.
Well, maybe if you look at the attachments, there are two. The one is a spreadsheet, similar to the one that we've just seen, and then there's one that's called a document called Airports Company of South Africa .docx. Maybe that will refresh your memory. So if you go to page 42, you'll see the document.
I recall this document.
So you recall this document. And would it be correct to say that this document is motivating the wisdom of entering into the swaps that we've just been looking at?
No, I think this document explains the swap transactions that have been entered into.
But it's not just explaining the swap transactions that are being entered into, it's motivating them. If I can take you down to, if you go to page 43, you'll see, I feel that ACSA can get better value by changing the profile of the loan, proposing that ACSA enters into a swap agreement with an intermediary bank. So what the memo is doing is it's referring to an existing DBSA loan, and it's saying you'll get better value by swapping your exposure on that loan by entering into an interest rate swap. Would that be a correct summary of this memorandum?
Yes.
Do you recall who advised ACSA in the first place to take out the development bank loan for 1.5 billion?
That's Regiments.
Regiments Capital, yes. Who's writing this memorandum? Mr. Letlaka, where does he work?
It comes from Regiments. I don't know who wrote it.
Yes, well, so it comes from Regiments. So Regiments advised ACSA to enter into a development bank loan for 1.5 billion. Were they paid a fee for that?
I think so.
And now they're saying you'll get better value if you get out of the loan that we advised you to get into and swap and enter into an interest rate swap. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just remember to articulate your responses audibly, Mr. Ramosebudi. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I pronounce your surname correctly.
Yes, Chairperson, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Can I then, and did ACSA enter into this interest rate swap with those 3 CPI swaps? Did it follow Regiment's advice in this regard?
I can't recall, but ACSA did trade the interest rate swaps.
Well, let's maybe go a little bit lower down, which might refresh your memory. If you go down to page 57, you'll see an email from Moss Brickman to Eric Wood, dated 23 March 2010, so we're still talking about the same process. It says, "Hi Eric, below is the schedule of fee payments that we should be able to capture on the proposed ACSA transaction. The values in the table are per basis point actual on the prescribed dates, and then it says payment of fees to regiments. It's got ACSA on the left-hand side, and it's got a schedule of dates, and it says total per basis point, around 1,178,673 per basis point. Am I correct in interpreting this email that Nedbank is writing to regiments saying, we can capture these fees for you, which will be paid by ACSA on the following dates, and the total that you will get per basis point is 1.178 million.
Yeah, as per this sheet, yes.
And what fee, do you recall what fee regiments took on the last swap where we saw their fee? Do you recall how many basis points they took?
The last invoice which you saw was about 11 million rand.
Yes. Do you recall how many basis points that translated to? We did actually.
I think they were quoting in the document, in the email, 10 basis points.
10 basis points. Yeah. So if we applied the same 10 basis point rate here, what would the fee to regiments be?
Yeah, without doing the calculations, I can't vouch for it.
No, but it says, look, this is easy mental arithmetic. Total per basis point, 1,178,673. 10 basis points would give you 11.786 million. Is that not correct?
Chairperson.
Well, let me put the question a different way. If the total per basis point is this amount, and they get 10 basis points, they will get 10 times that amount. Is that not correct?
Yeah, a simple arithmetic calculation, yes, it does exactly that. But if we compare the numbers, because there's a time value of money here, the numbers are different. Here is 11,786,000. The other one is 11,540,000.
No, we're talking about different transactions. That's why that's why they don't correlate. This is a new transaction. They've already got their 13 million fee from the last one. So you will agree that if for the new transaction at 10 basis points, they'll be looking at 11.78 million.
True.
The answer is yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you aware that they were going to be paid this amount of 11.78?
No.
You weren't?
No, I wasn't aware.
You weren't. Can I take you a little bit lower down to page 61, which is now 26 March 2010. And we see now an invoice from Regiments to Moss Brickman. It's invoice Ned 5 of 2010. It goes to Nedbank. And the narrative on it is origination and facilitation of the 1.5 billion interest rate swap transactions between Nedbank Capital and ACSA. And would those be those transactions that we were just looking at? Do you recall they were 1.5 billion?
You are now at page 62, Mr. Chaskalson.
I'm at
initially
page
said
62.
Yeah, you initially said 61, but I think you are now at 62.
I apologize,
Yes,
Chair.
okay.
62, yes. So origination and facilitation of 1.5 billion interest rate swap transactions between Nedbank and ACSA. Underneath the last sentence, Regiments Capital Pty Limited has informed its client that it is earning a fee for the facilitation of the above transaction. Now, you earlier said that you had assumed that Regiments would get a fee, but you've also said that you weren't aware that the fee would be, I then said 11.78. We see this one says 10.78. Were you aware that the fee would be 10.78?
Oh.
Were you aware that Regiments...
No,
and-
Chairperson.
Yeah, just remember to make sure your answer is audible.
Were you aware that Regiments and Nedbank apparently had an arrangement where they split a margin on a 50-50
No, Chairperson.
basis? You weren't aware of that either. Can I then go down to Standard, a transaction between Standard and ACSA, and that's at page 80. And there you'll see an email from Mr. Zaid Muller of Standard, Wednesday 19 May 2010, to Eric Wood, CC Johan Roos. And it says, "Hi Eric, thank you for your assistance in securing this deal. We really appreciate it. The following are outstanding from ACSA. Please can you chase it up for us? And can you also please send us some documentation disclosing the agreement between yourself and ACSA and the fee disclosure? Our legal head would like it on file." So Nedbank just want Regiments to put a statement on their invoice. Standard are saying we actually want the documentation that shows your agreement that you can take a fee from ACSA. Then, if you go down to page 82, you see the document. And there you will see an email from Eric Wood to yourself, 20 May 2010, copied to Zaid Muller and several other people at Standard, and the subject is interest rate swap. Do you recall receiving this email?
Chairperson, some time, but I see it came to me.
Are you accepting that you would have seen this email at the time?
Accepting that, yeah.
Hi, Phetolo. The following interest rate swap was transacted between ACSA and Standard Bank on 19 May 2010. 1.5 billion swap transacted on 19 May. Nature of underlying liability, the client, the nature of the swap. Regiments fee, 11 basis points. Person at client informed of Regiments fee, Phetolo Ramosebudi, Treasurer. Date informed, Wednesday the 19th of May 2010, telephonic, verbal. Should you require any further information or assistance, please contact myself. Do you recall having a telephonic conversation with Mr. Wood where he said we are about to conclude a 1.75 billion transaction for ACSA with Standard, and we're going to take an 11 basis point fee for ourselves, which ACSA will pay back over the life of the swap? Do you recall a conversation of that nature?
I can't recall the call. It's been some time, but let's assume it happened.
Well, I think let me ask a different question. If it hadn't happened, what would you have done when you received this email?
So he's informing me on the transaction that has been concluded and the fees that they've charged us.
Well, he is saying there was a telephone conversation with you during which he told you about this. So the question is, when you received this email and you would have seen what he says, namely that he had had a telephone conversation with you in which he had told you this, if there had been no such telephone conversation, what would you have done? If what he was saying was not true?
Let's look at the transaction, because what he says here, he has transacted on the 19th of May. And after the transaction on the 19th of May, he informed me of what the transaction entails, including the fees that is charged, which is what he has captured on here. So he has informed me what he has charged us on the transaction that he executed.
But apart from that, and Mr. Chaskalson, you must tell me if I misunderstand something. Apart from that, he is saying that he had a telephone conversation where he told you about these things. He told you that here is what he had done and that he's charging a fee for it. If, when you read this email, you thought, but he never spoke to me, why is he saying he spoke to me? What would you have done?
That's why I said it's been some time, so I can't recollect whether he called me.
Yes, but normally if somebody sends you an email and says you have spoken, maybe you have agreed on something and you never had that conversation, what would you do? How would you handle that?
Normally, if he has, because he might have called me the time he was writing the email. And then when he spoke to him at the time, then I said, please, can you reduce that in writing? Because I might have asked that question. Can you reduce what you're telling me in writing so that at least I have something? I could have done that here.
Well, Mr. Chaskalson, you might be able to, maybe that satisfies you, or...
It's good enough for my purposes,
okay,
Chair.
okay.
But Mr. Ramosebudi, there's another issue around this email that I want to raise with you. It says, person at client informed of regiment's fee, and bear in mind this is copied to Standard Bank, as you see in the CC lines. Person at client informed of regiment's fee, Phetolo Ramosebudi. So, on an email copied to Standard, Mr. Wood is saying, I have informed Ramosebudi at ACSA of our fee. Did it not strike you as strange that he was identifying you as the person at ACSA to cite as authority for his fees as opposed to Ms. Mabelani?
No, Chairperson. Because here he's stating the person he has informed on the transaction, not the person who's authorizing the transaction. So he has informed his colleague who required from Standard Bank a confirmation that the client knows about the fee, which he spoke to me, that I have charged 11 basis points. That's what he stated.
But you didn't know whether he was authorized to take this 11 basis point fee or not, did you?
I wouldn't have known because I don't know the details of the mandate that they have, whether it was on a fee base, on a fixed term, or on a saving base. That I have no clue with that, Chairperson.
So you don't know whether he's authorized to take this fee, and yet he's citing you as the only person at ACSA who he's told about the fee. Did that not concern you in any way?
No, I was at the time, I think I was the sole person at the Treasury at ACSA. I had one or two people that were working with me. And mostly the transactions, they were executed by myself.
Yes, but you didn't know whether he was allowed to take this fee on your version.
Excuse me, Chairperson?
On your version, you didn't know whether he was allowed to take this 11 basis point fee.
because I don't know the detail of the mandate he has.
Did you not think it may be prudent to find out whether he was entitled to take over 10 million rands that ACSA would have to pay back?
The transaction of this nature, they attract a fee, but the relative amount of that, I don't know, because the mandate, I don't have it.
But did you say earlier that you were the one who executed this transaction?
I'm saying yes, because I had the loan profile, so I gave them the loan profile. And also they were working with him, they had the loan profile to do this transaction. That's why from ACSA point of view, I was the coordinating point.
So you're the coordinating point. You commit ACSA to a transaction which will involve paying over 10 million rands to regiments, and you don't know whether ACSA actually is obliged to pay 10 million to regiments or not.
I don't think, Chairperson, that's the correct version of what this person says here. Here, he informed me of the charge of the interest rate. He has been appointed by somebody higher than me in ACSA. So who gave them the commitment to commit ACSA? I did not commit ACSA.
But I think the point is this, Mr. Ramosebudi. They have been appointed.
Correct?
And on your understanding of the position, if they were appointed, they were not appointed to do this work for free.
Precisely true.
They were going to charge
True.
for this work.
True.
So when he phones you and says, I'm charging for this, should you not have said, why are you telling me about this specific charge? You are charging, of course. Why are you telling me about this specific charge?
You are correct, Chairperson.
What's the purpose? Why? You haven't told me about other charges. Why are you telling me about this one?
For the purpose of responding to, because Standard Bank needed a confirmation. Because Standard Bank needed a confirmation whether this regiment is doing this transaction on behalf of ACSA. Because they might have not done it on behalf of ACSA.
Well, if I take into account what I've heard, it appears that Standard Bank was concerned that nothing should be done, no fee should be earned or taken unless ACSA knew about it and had authorized it. That's why they wanted, that they even wanted to know who knew about it. And then this person says, well, I phoned Mr. Ramosebudi. He's the person who knows about it. And the question is, when he phoned you, if he did phone you, we assume he did. When he phoned you and said, you know, there's this transaction and I'm charging for this, shouldn't your natural reaction have been, why are you telling me that you are charging for this? Because of course you are charging for the work in accordance with whatever agreement. So what's the purpose of telling me? So the question is, shouldn't your reaction have been precisely that?
Chairperson, I don't see it in that fashion.
Yes, tell me how you see it.
And how I see it is precisely from the email from Zaid Mullah here. Zaid Mullah wanted a disclosure agreement between ACSA and regiments. And he wanted that disclosure to actually even specify the fee that is going to be charged. But it was not about, yes, these regiments were transacting with Standard Bank on behalf of ACSA, and therefore there's a fee to be earned. That one is a normal, in a normal course of business. You transact on behalf of anybody, you charge a fee. But what Zaid was looking for is a disclosure agreement, which this email, which Eric has sent to Standard Bank, it is not saying that. Here it says, he told me of the fee. He informed me that it is a fee of 11 basis points that is being charged.
Why would he have to tell you about this fee if the fee fell within the agreement? Why would he need to tell you if he was charging a fee that was in accordance with his appointment, with their appointment?
There could be two things.
Yes.
One could be that maybe in terms of the disclosure that he forwarded to Standard Bank, that Standard Bank required, the fee that is charging is outside the boundaries. That's one.
It's outside
Outside the
agreement.
the terms of the
Terms of the agreement, yeah.
Or I could have asked myself, for this transaction, maybe I was doing the calculation, and then it's not giving me the numbers that I'm expecting. And then it says, how much have you charged your fees on this? What are the trading cost of this transaction? Because then I also have to satisfy myself that the price that I'm taking is fair.
Mr. Chaskalson?
Thank you, Chair. Can I take you to Regiment's invoices for these two transactions? If we go to, we've seen the 10.78 billion invoice at page 62 that Nedbank paid Regiments. Can I take you to the standard invoice? If you go to page 84, you'll see there that Nedbank invoiced standard 22 million for this transaction. Were you aware that 11 basis points would translate to 22 million?
I can't
You said
recollect it.
Nedbank, you mean Regiments?
Regiment's invoice standard, 22 million.
I can't recollect. I can't, because they normally did not come through to me.
Sorry, Mr. Ramosebudi, I didn't hear that answer.
I did not see this because they normally didn't come through to me.
So you didn't see the invoice, but would you have known that 11 basis points would translate to around 22 million?
Yeah, probably if I did, work out the numbers at the time, I could have maybe.
But on a transaction of that nature, you'd have been aware broadly, presumably, that 11 basis points will mean around 22 million PV.
Yeah. The challenge with this type of transaction is that chairperson, they are of the nature where we call them over-the-counter transaction. So over-the-counter transaction, in their nature, they are not liquid. So meaning that there are no willing buyer and sellers waiting on the wings to take them. And therefore, should you want to transact at the time, the price you get might not be fully disclosed to you because they charge so many things, the bankers in this type of transaction. So at the time, I could have seen a number, but how it was made of, I couldn't determine that.
No, but in this particular case, Standard had told you an 11 basis point amount on this 1.7 billion swap is going to be paid to Regiments. They had told you. So you knew, whatever else you didn't know about the details of the swap, you knew that ACSA would be paying 11 basis points
Yes, it
to
would be
Regiments.
paying 11 basis points.
Yes, so you could have, the broad amount that ACSA was going to pay Regiments, you knew.
Not exactly.
Well, but you're treasurer of ACSA, you know what 11 basis points on a swap of 1.7 billion on those terms is going to yield in terms of a present value.
Not to the extent that I did the calculation at the time. I could have done the calculation, yes, it would have informed.
Yeah. So if you had been interested, you would have been able to find that out yourself.
And normally you never get to the same number because it depends on the curve that we're using. They might have used different curve, and might use different curve, and therefore the numbers come differently.
Yes, but I mean, then, you wouldn't have reached a number of sort of 1 million.
There could be anything. The standard deviation could be as wide as 10%, depending on the curve itself.
10% sounds like quite a big standard deviation to me, but even at 10%, you'd have known that regiments were getting at least approximately 20 million on this transaction.
Fair?
Can I ask you, before we go a little bit further, how do you understand the procurement arrangements in relation to paying out these sorts of amounts of money? 22 million to regiments on the standard swap, 13 million on the one Nedbank swap, 11 million on the other. That's over 40 million that's been paid to regiments. How do you understand the procurement arrangements that relate to paying these amounts of money to regiments? Where does this happen in a procurement process?
The procurement at the time was not within Treasury. It was within a division outside Treasury or Finance. So I don't know to what extent, when the appointment of regiments were effected, how was the procurement process at the time?
But was it not your responsibility to establish what the procurement process was and whether regiments were entitled to these vast fees that you were now seeing? 40 million that we've looked at, and it gets bigger.
No, you're quite correct, Mr. Chairperson. Through yourself, Chairperson, should I have initiated the process to appoint regiments to execute the funding plan and risk management? I think that's a process I would have undertaken. Firstly, to know what my delegation of authority is, so that I can make sure that I do it within my authority. So in this case, they were already appointed, they brought in, this is what they're going to do, and therefore any payments that was done was as per that appointment. I had no to question my bosses or whoever.
But, sorry, Mr. Ramosebudi, we've already seen, well, you didn't know what that appointment said.
Precisely.
We've already seen that the two large payments that regiments took were not on the same basis. They took 11 basis points from Standard, 10 basis points from Nedbank. So they couldn't have been governed by one set of rules. And if there had been a procurement process which appointed regiments on particular terms, there'd have been a standard rate for all of the funds that they raised, presumably. Is that not right?
Quite correct.
So, well, what I have to put to you is that you were at best gravely negligent in allowing these sorts of transactions to pass through without establishing whether regiments had the authority of ACSA to take these fees. Do you have a comment on that?
Chairperson, I don't think it's quite true that I was negligent to the best of regiments. I think regiments were appointed, and it was prior my time to be at ACSA, and therefore the execution of their mandate and the payments that have effected in the past could also not have been my negligence. And therefore, any payment that was effected, even in my tenure, what I need to know on my side was the value for what they did. Because that was my responsibility, and what I was accountable for, is the value for the work that they did. And that's what I was making sure that there is. Otherwise, then I was going to be negligent, Mr. Chairperson.
No, but Mr. Ramosebudi, that's not how procurement works in the public sector. You don't have individuals called upon to make individualized judgment calls on whether individual transactions, which may or may not have been authorized, grant value. You require some regular procurement processes. Do you not accept that?
True.
And on what basis could you have assumed that there was a regular procurement process governing these fees that regiments was taking?
The process that was undertaken to broad regiments at ACSA in 2007, and to the best of the time that they've been there, I didn't know how that was followed. And I was not in procurement in the process at the time.
So you didn't know whether they did have authority or didn't have authority. Well, you've said that already. But you were happy to stand by while, on your watch, fees of more than 40 million rand were paid to them on ACSA's account.
The question, Chairperson, is the value for money. That's what my responsibilities were. They were brought in by the FD at the time, and he says, you'll work with these people, and I worked with them. And what I needed to make sure is the value for what they're going to be paid. And that's what I did.
Well, I'm not sure that it's plausible to say your focus was about whether there was value for money, because that suggests to me that you wouldn't mind if they did something that they had no authority to do, as long as in the end you thought, well, it's a good thing. Whereas there is a prior question. Before they can do anything, it must be something that fell within their mandate. And if they have a good idea, they have an idea that they think would add value to the transaction, they would need to come back to the client and say, you know, there is this idea, but it falls outside our mandate. This is how we think it would be good for you. We just want your authority that we can go ahead, but if we go ahead, this is how we'll charge you. And if the client says, yes, you can go ahead, and that's the agreement about what you will charge, then it's fine. Or the client might say, yes, it's a good idea, but in terms of our financial situation, blah, 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 no, don't do it. And in which case they would not be entitled to charge. Or the client might say, it would be nice to have, but it's not essential, so don't do it. So I'm saying to you, when you answer on the basis of saying your focus or your job was to see whether there was value for money, it gives me the impression that you are saying it wouldn't matter whether they did something that fell outside their mandate or not. Do you want to comment on that?
Thanks, Chairperson. Maybe let me put it in this fashion. In a corporate environment, the way I'm narrating this is as if I was the only person who was doing the transaction and communicating with Regiments and Standard Bank and Nedbank. That was not the case. Every week or every day, I had to interact with my boss to tell him about the transactions that are happening. Because if he or she was to sign off something, they need to understand who are they signing off. They're signing off. Secondly, there's a board, executive committee of executive committee of management of the organization at the time. Those transactions needed to be reported there. And subsequent to that, they had to go to Finance and Risk Management Committee, a board subcommittee, and a board committee, so that they understand the transaction that they were happening. Should they have been at the point when I was narrating all the steps throughout the management, my boss, my management committee, executive committee, and the board at the time, something that indicated to me that when these guys were doing this transaction, how did you appoint them? I would have taken a different step, but none whatsoever at the point when we were doing this transaction.
Mr. Chaskalson?
Mr. Ramosebudi, did you tell any of your supervisors that regiments were taking fees of 10 basis points or 11 basis points on these transactions?
I can't recall, Mr. Chaskalson. I can't recall, Chairperson.
Can I just go back a little bit, because maybe I may have misunderstood this, and it goes back to the question of your role in regard to this. You said that the regiments were appointed before your time. Is that right?
True.
Yes, you came in when they were already appointed.
True.
And then you said those who appointed them would have known what fee arrangement had been made. Is that right?
True?
Yes. Now, wasn't your role, after you came in, to see to it that they acted in accordance with ACSA's expectations of what they were supposed to do and were paid for what they were asked to do? Wasn't that part of your role?
That part was not discussed between myself and my boss for the management of the contract itself.
Do you know whose responsibility, as far as you are concerned, that would have been? Because there must be somebody who was supposed to do that.
Of the number of institutions that I've worked for, if there's that part of procurement process that the payments have been done and made on behalf of the organization, the guys in procurement have to track. They track the contract amount, the contract period, the contract payments, and then how much is outstanding, whether it's still within, so that it does not become part of the irregular expenditure at some point in time.
Can I just
And
ask a
therefore-
question, Mr. Ramosebudi, because I think you're right about how the system should work. But the particular magic of these transactions, from the perspective of regiments, is that they won't show up anywhere in ACSA's books as payments to regiments. They'll just show up in Nedbank's books as an amount that gets paid to regiments. All that the ACSA books will show is repayment of amounts to Nedbank in terms of a swap transaction. No one looking at the transaction from the outside would know that regiments have taken 10 million out of it. So your whole proposition that if there's something irregular about this, it will be picked up by people seeing irregular expenditure, I must put to you, breaks down, because the transaction is designed to hide the fee to Nedbank, to regiments. What's your response to that?
I don't think so, Chairperson.
Let me follow up. Who is going to see that Nedbank has paid regiments 13 million on the one, 11 million on the other? Who inside ACSA is going to see that?
So, the nature of the transaction itself, as I said, on a day one, the accountants do the entries such that they can then split the amounts that have been paid or that are going to be paid to different parties. And on a day one, the fair value of the swap is zero. The swap, including its cost on day one, is going to be zero.
Yeah, Mr. Ramosebudi, you're not
Because it
answering my
depends-
question. Sorry, Mr. Ramosebudi, I must ask you to answer my question. Who inside ACSA, by looking at these transactions, is going to know that Nedbank has paid regiments 13 million on one transaction, 11 million on another, and that ACSA is paying back to Nedbank those amounts? Who's going to see that on any of this documentation? Where is it going to be visible?
The accountant knows in terms of how they do the accounting on the swap transaction. So those that are in the accounting, they would know how they do the accounting from the perspective when they compare the effective rate and the executed rate at the time.
Yes, but they won't know that built into the rate that is being paid by ACSA to Nedbank is 10 basis points that are going to be present valued by Nedbank to pay an amount of 13 million to regiments. Would they know that?
The nature of the transaction doesn't allow to book the losses or the profit immediately on day one.
Yes, no one looking at these transactions from ACSA's side will see anything that tells people at ACSA that regiments has been paid 13 million on this particular transaction, 11 million on that transaction. Is that not correct?
During the life of the transaction itself, through yourself, Chairperson, the movement of the swap itself will then determine the fair values, which shows the profit or the losses of the instruments. Because the rate itself is a composite of a number of elements.
Mr.
And
Ramosebudi, we're
the cost is not
we're
one.
not talking about whether people inside ACSA know what ACSA is paying in terms of the swaps in a globular sense. Of course they do. But would anybody know that one component of that payment is 10 basis points that are going to repay a fee of 13 million that Regiments has taken? Would anyone know that? That's the question I want you to answer.
If so ever, we then request the detailed component of the swap itself, then we can apportion what the fee structure is.
And did anyone at ACSA request the detail?
In this case, yes, Eric disclosed 11 basis points to me.
And did you disclose that to anybody else? Because I've asked you earlier.
From an accounting perspective, that was not how we accounted the financial instruments.
So does that mean you didn't disclose it to anybody else?
Yes.
Thank you. So nobody inside ACSA would know, other than you, would know that on this transaction, let's take the standard transaction where there was complete disclosure at standards insistence. No one would know that on that transaction, Regiments had been paid 22 million rands at ACSA's expense.
To the extent through yourself, Chairperson, that the settlement agreement does not stipulate, then nobody would know. But half the time, the settlement agreement must stipulate what are we settling between the two parties.
Well, can you point me to a single other person at ACSA who would know that Regiments were paid 22 million by Standard and that ACSA was paying that back on the swap to Standard?
Through yourself, Chairperson, I don't remember who were in the ACSA at the time, so I can't pinpoint anybody.
Can you say with certainty that there would be anyone other than you who would have known that Regiments had been paid 22 million?
I also did not know that they were paid 22 million until today I see this.
Yes, but you did know they were being paid 11 basis points on a swap of 1.7 billion, and we talked about
You're correct.
margins of error. So you knew they were being paid something between about 19.8 million and 24.2 million or 24.4
You're
million.
correct, yeah.
Yes. So you knew that. Did anybody else know that?
I was the only one who was trading this transaction and swap, and those that are in the accounting.
And would the people in accounting have known that Regiments were getting around 22 million out of this?
How they did the accounting, probably they could have. But on a day of transaction, the swap itself is zero. It doesn't have a profit or loss.
We're talking at cross purposes. We're not talking about the value of the swap. We're talking about the value that Regiments took out of the swap.
But that's how we determine through a self-chairperson the effective rate that you're going to pay.
Oh, all right, let me move on. You've been talking about value for money a great deal. Are you talking about value for money for ACSA or value for money for you?
Value for money for ACSA.
Well, let me take you to another email. Can you go to page 59?
Where?
59.
59.
Yes. I want to put it in the chronology. We've been talking about events in March 2010. So we've been talking about events in March 2010. Just to put it back in chronology, you recall there was that email exchange at page 57 between Moss Brickman and Eric Wood about the fee we should be able to capture on the ACSA swap. That was 23 March. And that the invoice that Regiments issued to Nedbank in respect of the swap was issued on 31 March for 10.784 million. So between 23 March, Nedbank and Regiments were looking for a fee to capture, and on 31 March, that fee had crystallized into an invoice of 10.784 million. Let's look at a date between that, 23 March. You see this email? It's addressed from you to Eric Wood and Niven Pillay. Who is Niven Pillay?
Niven Pillay is one of the directors of Regiments.
And do you recall sending this email?
I can't recall.
You can't recall?
Yeah.
Can you say positively that you never sent this email?
I might have sent, but I can't recall.
Okay, well, let me read what the email says. Dear Eric, I would like to borrow E18 stock from Regiments fund managers and could repo the stock with Repo Trader. I'm going to trade the cash in the money market, which will be collateralized with Regiments. There's no risk from Regiments' point of view. I can do this trade under Regiments. Does that refresh your mind? Do you recall asking Regiments to borrow stock from them?
I know for a fact that I'm also a market participant, so there's a number of transactions that I do on my own.
Yes, but I'm asking a separate question, which is, for the purposes of your market transactions in your individual capacity, this would have been in your individual capacity, would it not have been? Yes. Did you ever borrow stock from Regiments for your individual transactions?
I think I wanted to borrow, but I don't think I got it.
Right, so you asked them to borrow and they said, no, we're not going to lend to you. Let's see. Let's...
Sorry, what's the answer? What is the
Mr.
answer to
Ramosebudi,
that question?
the chair just wants you to repeat your answer.
I said I wanted to borrow, but I was not offered.
Okay.
So they wouldn't lend to you. Is that correct? They wouldn't lend the stock
They
to you.
didn't lend me.
Yes, but you asked.
I asked, yes.
Yes. Let's look at another email. Can you go down to let's look at the date of the Regiment's invoice to standard again. That's on page 84, 20 May 2010. That's on page 84. If one goes to page 712, can I ask you to turn to page 712? You'll see an email that's addressed from you to Eric Wood. The date is 28 July 2010.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to locate page 712. I think some of the pages don't have the black numbers. Huh? I see Nedbank has got, some Nedbank documents have got the red numbers only.
It's right at the back of the file, Chair.
Okay, I've got it.
Do you have it, Mr. Ramosebudi?
Yes, I do.
It says, it's an email from you to Mr. Eric Wood dated 28 July. It says, Dear Eric, please receive a copy of the research and will appreciate the review and comments as soon as possible for finalization. Regards. Do you recall sending that email?
I can't recall.
You can't recall. Maybe this will refresh your memory. If you go down a page to 713, sorry, if you just look at that email on 714, there's an attachment called Workbook 2, an Excel spreadsheet. If you go down to 713, we see what that spreadsheet was. And it's an invoice from Risk Stats Consulting. Would you just remind the Chair what Risk Stats Consulting is?
Chairperson, in the beginning, I spoke about Risk Stats Consulting as one of the subsidiary of RiskMates, which was one of my company. And
if I recall correctly, you had 100% interest in that.
Yes, I did.
And you'll see the date is defaulted to today's date, but it was an attachment to an email on 28 July 2010. You'll see that it is an invoice to Regiments Capital for an amount of 400,000 plus 56,000 VAT for actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital. Do you recall sending this invoice to Regiments Capital?
I can't recall, Chairperson.
You can't recall?
No.
Do you recall doing any actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital?
Chairperson, I have been advised by my lawyers not to respond on this one in case I incriminate myself.
Okay.
Can I move on then? Can I ask you to go to page, I just want to check that my note is right here. Can I ask you to go to page 665? Now, you can't speak to this because this is a bank statement of Regiments Capital, and the date of the bank statement is 30 June 2010. I presume you've never seen this bank statement before you came to the Commission, before the Commission gave you documents. Is that correct?
It's the first time I see it.
Well, there is an entry on 1 June 2010 in which an amount of 456,000 is paid to Risk Stats Consulting. But what you may well have seen...
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairperson. 665, you said.
665, Chair.
Please let me just... That's a red one, not a black one.
No, the black one, 665 black.
One.
The 665, they're in red, there is no black.
I think what is confusing is that there are a number of pages which have only the red number. I can see 597, I can see 604. Then you have to, it looks like, skip a lot of pages that don't have a black numbers on my file.
Chair, I must apologize for this. This is going to be, it's going to make this part of the cross-examination particularly difficult because...
The next number I have is a black 712, but from 604, the next black page number is 712. So I don't know what happened with the pagination. It may be that it should be fixed during the lunch break.
Chair, I think we must do that because otherwise, because we're going to get into some detailed bank transactions, which will make this complicated.
I think the 604 appears, and it appears the page next to the page after 604, black 604 is red 603, but there is no black pagination for red 603. And then you go on and on until the red 710, and red 710 is black 712. And then between black 604 and black 712, it looks like there are no black numbers.
Chair, I think what I must do, because I doubt that we're going to be able to put black numbers on your file, Mr. Ramosebudi's file, and all the legal team's file. I must work out how my black numbers correlate to your red numbers.
Well, I think they could be put as long as the numbers are the same, because the pages that have been skipped may be about 100 pages, which could be done. But if you have another way that can be used when we come back, that's fine. So we can do one of two things now. It's about 14 minutes to 1. We can either take the lunch break now, and this can be attended to during the lunch break, or we can use the last 14 minutes of the time for you to ask on issues that don't require these pages.
Chair, let's use the time. And
yeah.
what we can then come back to
Yeah.
tying up any references that we need.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Ramosebudi, can I take you then to a document that is at black 714? And that document is dated. Do you have the document, Mr. Ramosebudi?
714?
714. Black 714.
Yes.
And that is an email addressed from you to Mr. Wood on 27 September 2010. Again with an attachment workbook 1.xlsx. Dear Eric, I will appreciate your review and comments on the stock. Do you recall sending that email?
I can't recall, Chairperson.
If I take you to the attachment, it is at 715, an invoice from Risk Stats Consulting for consulting work. It's addressed to Box 78 Midrand 1685. Do you know what Box 78 Midrand 1685, whose address that is?
I can't recall. I don't
Can't recall. And it says actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital, 700,000. Do you recall sending an invoice of this nature to Regiments Capital? Sorry, 700,000 plus VAT, total 798,000.
Chairperson, through yourself, may I reserve my rights not to respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
Okay.
Can I then take you to page 716? That is an email from yourself to Eric Wood dated 4 October 2010 with a subject research report and an attachment invoice with tax calculation 1.xls. That's another spreadsheet. Do you recall sending this email to Mr. Wood?
I can't recall it.
And can I take you to the attachment which is at 717? It's an invoice to an invoice addressed to Niven Pillay of Regiments Capital. Can you just remind the chair who Mr. Pillay is?
Niven Pillay is one of the directors of Regiments.
What page, Mr. Chaskalson?
717.
Okay.
And it has the reference flow of funds for, it has, it's in the name of Azana Capital Markets. Can you remind the chair what Azana is?
Azana is one of the companies that I had and deregistered to date.
And you had 100% interest in it before you before it was deregistered, yes. And the description on the invoice is consulting service for the development of portfolio optimization and performance attribution at a per agreed rate of 19.50 per hour for 19 days. And the amount is 296,400 plus VAT, yielding a total of 337,896. Do you recall sending this invoice to Mr. Pillay at Regiments Capital?
No,
Your answer is no, you don't recall.
I don't recall.
I see. Are you saying you didn't send this invoice to, do you recall sending this invoice to Mr. Wood's email on 4 October 2010?
Chairperson, through yourself, may I not respond to this question in case I incriminate myself?
Okay.
Can I ask you to go to page 718? That's another email addressed from you to Mr. Wood on 4 October 2010. It has a different spreadsheet called Workbook 2 attached to it. Do you recall sending that email to Mr. Wood?
I can't recall.
Can we go down to page 719? And there we see an invoice addressed to Regiments Capital in the name of Risk Stats for actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital, an amount of 403,595.99, which, if you add that, comes to 460,099 rands 43 cents. Do you recall sending that invoice to Mr. Wood on 4 October 2010?
Chairperson, through yourself, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
Can we go to page 720? There is what appears to be an email from Eric Wood to Niven Pillay on 7 April 2010, forwarding an email from you to Eric Wood on 2011, forwarding an email from you to Eric Wood on the same day, 7 April 2011. The time that your email apparently was sent is 11:36 in the morning, and it refers to Invoice 202. Do you recall sending that email to Eric Wood on 7 April 2011?
I can't recollect, Chairperson.
Let's look at Invoice 202 that was attached to it. It's at page 721. It's an invoice from Kaditlu Health Services, trading as Ram's Pharmacy. Will you remind the Chair who Kaditlu are?
Kaditlo Health Services is a company of my younger brother.
It's your younger brother's company, and that invoice is addressed to Eric Wood at Regiments Capital, and the services are for a site inspection of Regiment's premises relating to storage and personnel, consultation, I missed, that was item 1, supply of health products, herbal health products, multivitamin supplements, non-scheduled medical products, and then training facilitation offered by a dietitian, a personal trainer, a pharmacist, a physician, another personal trainer, and some traveling and logistics. The total is 185,810.94. When you add that, it's 212,964. Do you know if your brother provided these services to Regiments Capital?
Chairperson, through yourself, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
I see that. I see that Kaditlo Health Services to trades or traded, depending whether it's still trading, as Ram's Pharmacy. Am I correct in thinking that Ram's is derived from part of your surname?
That's true, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Obviously,
And it's your younger brother's business, Kaditlo? Yes. Can we go to the...
Okay, I'm sorry. I think we spoke at the same time. That would also be your younger brother's surname?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Can we go back up to page 85? I should have taken this a little earlier in the chronology. Do you have page 85? That is an email sent from yourself to Eric Wood, and it says forward invoice, the subject line is forward invoice with tax calculation 2.xls. And you can see, and then there's an attachment, invoice with tax calculation 2.xls. You can see that what was forwarded, if you go a little bit low down, was an email from you, Phetolo, at your ACSA address, Phetolo Ramosebudi at airports.coza, to yourself at your risk maths address, with the same subject, invoice with tax calculation 2.xls. So can I ask you first, do you recall forwarding an email of this nature from your ACSA address to your risk maths address in May 2010?
Through yourself, Chairperson, I can't recollect this.
Okay. And
It's been some time.
yes. And can I ask again, do you recall sending this email to Mr. Wood on the same day, 26 May 2010?
I can't recollect, Chairperson.
You can't recollect. Well, attached to that spreadsheet, attached to that email was a spreadsheet with 7 different tabs. Can we look at the first tab? It's at page 86. It's an invoice in the name of Venus Liquor Store. And can you just remind the Chair what Venus Liquor Store is?
Venus Liquor Store was my business, trading under Lazana Capital Markets.
And the invoice is billed to Niven Pillay of Regiments Capital. We remember Mr. Pillay. The description is provision of liquor, beverages and catering services for the function at Regiments Capital, and an amount is 257,362.37, and when you add VAT, that comes to 293,393.10. Do you recall sending this invoice to Mr. Wood on 26 May 2010?
Chairperson, through yourself, may I not respond to this one in case I remain myself?
Can I then ask you, do you recall ever providing liquor to Regiments Capital for a function that was large enough to cost 257,000 in liquor in 2010?
Chairperson, with your permission, may I not respond to you in case I incriminate myself?
Okay.
If you then can go down to page 87, which was the second of the 7 tabs on the spreadsheet, that's another invoice from Venus Liquor Store, also addressed to Niven Pillay of Regiments Capital. That is described provision of liquor, beverages and catering services for the function at Regiments Capital. That's 51,021, and venue and conference equipment, 49,150. Total of 100,171. When you add VAT, that becomes 114,1194.94. Do you recall sending this invoice to Mr. Wood on 26 May 2010?
Chairperson, through your permission, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
Can I ask you then, did your business, Venus Liquor Store, ever provide venues and conference equipment to Regiments Capital?
Again, Chairperson, through your permission, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
Okay.
Can we go down to page 88?
Well, before we go to page 88, Mr. Chaskalson, so on the basis of the 2 invoices, one at page 86, the other one at page 87, it would appear that Venus Liquor Store sent invoices, 2 invoices at least on the same day in regard to the provision of liquor which it charged probably about 400, more than 400,000 rand.
That would appear from
If you put
the two together,
yeah.
indeed, Chair, it's over 400,000.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We are at 1 o'clock. Would this be a convenient time? Or you want to finish something?
Chair,
You can finish something if you want to finish.
if we can just finish the
Yeah.
invoices attached to that email.
Okay.
Page 88, invoice from Risk Stats Consulting to Regiments Capital for developing of the risk monitoring methodology for and on behalf of Regiments Capital, 295,000 plus VAT, which gives 336,300. Do you recall sending this email to Mr. Wood on 26 May 2010?
I can't recollect.
You can't recollect.
I can't recollect.
See.
I can't recollect.
No, I heard your answer, but in fairness to you, you've been asserting a right against self-incrimination up till this point. I don't...
That's exactly what it is.
Sorry?
I can't recollect sending the email.
You can't okay.
I can't respond.
Yes.
In case I respond.
Okay.
I think Mr. Chaskalson wants to say to you, Mr. Ramosebudi, if you say you can't recall, you are responding to the question.
Okay.
So you must make up your mind
Okay.
whether you want to assert your privilege
Okay.
or you want to give an answer. So he was seeking to make sure that you understand that. Okay.
Just through yourself, Chairperson, I think the logic that I was using was that he was referring to an email, then I say I can't recall. And then he then referred to an invoice, then I say I can't respond.
No, that's fine. As long as you are aware.
Yeah.
It may be that you say a particular, in regard to a particular question, you have an answer, but in regard to another question, you wish not to answer. But he sought to make sure that you understand. Okay.
Well, maybe if I can ask the question slightly differently. Did Risk Stats invoice Regiments Capital for the development of a risk monitoring methodology for and on behalf of Regiments Capital on 26 May 2010?
Chairperson, through yourself, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
And then on the following page 90, an invoice again from Risk Stats, again 26 May 2010, actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital for 946,017 plus VAT, which is 1,078,456 rands and 30 cents. Did Risk Stats Consulting invoice Regiments for actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments in an amount with VAT of 1,078,456 and 30 cents on 26 May 2010?
Again, through yourself, Chairperson, may I not respond to this in case I incriminate myself?
Then over the page 91, another invoice from Risk Stats dated 26 May 2010, also for actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments Capital. This time the amount is 546,014 rands and 30 cents with VAT. That goes to 622,456 and 30 cents. Did Risk Stats send this invoice to, did Risk Stats issue this invoice to Regiments on 26 May 2010?
Through yourself, Chairperson, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
And then on page 92, another Risk Stats invoice to Regiments for actuarial and risk management consulting on behalf of Regiments for 400,000 plus 56,000 VAT, 456,000 in all. Did Risk Stats issue regiments with this invoice in May 2010?
Through yourself, Chairperson, again with this one, may I not respond to it in case I incriminate myself?
Chair, we've now reached the end of those 7 invoices that were attached to the email of 26 May. And would this be a convenient time to break?
Yes, just before we do that, Mr. Ramosebudi, do you have any qualifications for providing actuarial services yourself?
Chairperson, if you go to my statement, it
Yes.
clearly articulates my qualification. I have got a very strong mathematical background.
Mathematical background?
Yeah,
Yes,
which deals with a
Yes.
whole number of issues, from
Yes.
actuarial,
Yes.
risk management.
Yes.
So that's my forte, that's my expertise.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. Okay, let's take the lunch adjournment. We will resume at 2:10. We adjourn.
Thanks, Chair.